S.B.R. podcast community. This is your host, Brian McDonough, with the first episode, as promised, of the S.B.R. podcast. And I'm really excited for today's show because we have a business professional, a sports business professional coming on who has had loads of experience in the world of sports ticket sales. Someone who has worked his way up right out of college and is now currently employed with the Los Angeles Clippers. And before I get there, I want to touch upon a couple of things because I think it's necessary to kind of lead our way into that discussion. This show, the point of this podcast is to bring on sports business personnel, individuals who work day in and day out to essentially make the products, sports products that you watch, enjoyable, whether it's through ticket sales, whether it's through analytics, whether it's through marketing, communications, just like any other business. The point of this podcast is to bring on those individuals who are behind the scenes, hear their stories, hear what they do for a living, and hear how they curate the final product, which is what we all love, sports. And right now, with COVID-19, with the coronavirus, it's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. Our lives are heading in potentially a direction that no one saw coming, right? And at the end of the day, we love to look at sports as a way to escape reality. And not having sports as a way to escape reality is something that I know personally for me, or anyone who is listening to this podcast, I'm sure, somewhat depressing. But let it be known that those individuals behind the scenes are still working very, very hard to bring you a product down the road that you will enjoy and maybe return life to some sort of normalcy. And that's with the NBA. Later this month, as of right now, in early July, we're looking at the NBA returning. One of those teams will be the Los Angeles Clippers, a team that is currently second place in the Western Conference, an organization that brought in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, a franchise that hasn't had a lot of success up until this season. And I'm sure, just like all businesses have been just completely decimated by coronavirus, the Los Angeles Clippers were not expecting this when they shelled out a lot of money for those two marquee players. But as I stated before, sports are a way for us to return to normalcy as we work through this COVID-19 crisis. There's individuals like Justin Dunn out there who are helping bring back sports, helping bridge the gap from society to a form of entertainment that we all love. And I'm really excited today because I have Justin Dunn, the director of group ticket sales for the Los Angeles Clippers, on the phone here. Justin, how have you been?
Hey, Brad, I'm doing pretty well. It's good to talk to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope everything's going well with your family and everything.
Everyone's staying safe, and it's always great to talk with you, Justin. Just kind of wanted to discuss with you the NBA. Obviously, it's in a bubble right now. The whole country's in a bubble, if not the whole world. And we're looking back. Going to play games later this month, hopefully, right? And I just kind of would discuss with you, your role with the Los Angeles Clippers and your thoughts overall going back to work, right? I mean, that's really what the NBA is doing now. So if you want to introduce yourself, kind of give our viewers, our listeners an idea of what you do day to day, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one, I'm very excited. I'm hoping that everything will come to fruition. And I think in general, when you think about the bubble, I'm sure there'll be some ups and downs and some news articles here and that are negative and some positive. And, I think it's going to be the tough part of just staying positive. And, in my world and what I do in ticket sales, all we can do is control so much. So kind of going into my role, I direct our group sales team. Prior to joining the LA Clippers, I was in Columbus, Ohio in the NHL with the Columbus Blue Jackets, worked there, started there, and worked my way up under Drew Rabarchak, and was able to take the opportunity after working there for about 6.5 years and being a manager of inside sales to transition to LA. And my goal at the time was, no offense at the time to the LA Clippers, we were in a brand kind of developing our brand from our past ownership. But for me, it was an opportunity to look at growing a group sales department in a market that historically the Clippers have not been the most popular basketball team and haven't won any championships. And so I looked at that as a challenge and an opportunity to learn and challenge myself. And, I'm not sure if we'll get there, but I think at the same time, you're always looking to work for good people and working for people that you feel like you can learn from. And that's what I saw in that opportunity as well. It was not only a challenge for me, but I knew I was going to be doing it with the right people and the people that I wanted in my foxhole with me. That's
pretty cool. And just to kind of give our listeners an idea of your day-to-day, right? As a director of group ticket sales for the Clippers, I know your past experience with Columbus. As you said, you went from an inside sales rep to a season ticket service coordinator, then to the manager of inside sales, making that jump to the NBA, going from Columbus to the LA market. How different has that been?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a loaded answer. I think I've been blessed to work for two good organizations. And so in some ways they weren't different at all in the structure and just what the expectation was and how important things outside of tickets and sports and more of the community. That was important in Columbus, and it's certainly important in LA for the Clippers. So been blessed that not only do our customers, but also employees are really important. But the main changes and differences, one were the market. I would say that was the biggest challenge for me. Coming to LA, though, there's endless opportunity. In Columbus, I always get asked about how do you sell against the Ohio State Buckeyes, which I always think is kind of a goofy question. But in general, in LA, there's 11 different professional sports teams or more, but there's 20 million people in the market, so it's just a complete different situation. And not to mention a whole nother sports franchise in your league in the same building. And so it was unique. I think, learning, or I should say a big opportunity for me in changing companies was just understanding how to develop relationships at a director or higher level with people outside of the ticket sales department. In Columbus, the department or the organization was a little smaller. And there wasn't as much structure within leadership roles. So where I may be talking to someone in Columbus, now I may be talking to someone either higher up or I should say someone in between, a buffer potentially. So I got very comfortable in Columbus. When I got to LA, certainly was a challenge. And it also came with the timing. I got there about a month and a half before the season started. And, I'm meeting people in different departments and asking for things and I've never met them. And so
it's never easy.
Never easy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to be intentional. And so that's a learning lesson for me and something that, I feel like if I could teach anyone anything about going organization, people are different, but people expect and are looking for the same things, whether that's the respect, but just, being accountable and really doing it for the team and not doing it for yourself. And people can see that pretty quickly if you're in it for yourself or if you're in it for the whole team.
Yeah, and it sounds like now coming from Columbus to Los Angeles, obviously you touched on the market. You touched on how you do share the Staples Center with the Los Angeles Lakers. You also share the Staples Centers with LeBron James, who's arguably the biggest sports person in the world, right? The most popular athlete in the United States, top 5 worldwide. Tell me how you sell in a market with the Lakers. I know in the past we've discussed, you touched upon kind of the community sense, what you guys do in the community, the Clippers, to differentiate yourself. If you can touch upon that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's certainly changed with Kawhi and Paul.
Sure.
And so when I got there, the team was transitioning. It had traded Blake Griffin, Chris Paul the year prior, and so the expectations were pretty low. But the expectations from Steve and Gilliam, our president, were still high, and that's something you want. Obviously, you want to come in an organization and they want to challenge you to do more. And so for me, the actual opportunity was I have tickets and the Lakers don't. So for groups where the Lakers didn't cut out a certain amount of inventory, or if they did, very minimal, they didn't have the opportunity to go to a group outing with their church or their school or their nonprofit. And where the LA Clippers had more affordable tickets, better seating, and they had block seating. And so we were really able to take advantage of that. But that also is unfair to say. It wasn't like it was an overnight something that I did by coming to the Clippers. There's been a ton of strong relationships that have been started and continued and managed through the Clippers for, decades. And those are groups that are still coming out. And so, we've been able to take advantage of those relationships and really give back to our groups at that time when we had a lot of inventory and a lot of just access. Once we got Kawhi and Paul, it was different. My team had sold 100,000 tickets the year prior. First time in the Clippers history, we were in the top 10 in revenue and tickets sold. And then from there, I was really excited and then and looking to do more. Hopefully get in the top 3, top 5 in the NBA. And then we got Kawhi and Paul. So obviously that's something I really wanted and was excited about, but that certainly came with cutting down a lot of my ticket access. We went from being able to sell 100,000 tickets to really 40 to 50,000. And I should feel blessed. There are teams that in the past getting big players, I believe even the Heat, I could be wrong on that, but when they got Shaq originally, a lot of teams will let their group sales team go. That's not something the Clippers chose to do. And again, that's kind of where your question started, Brian, but it's how the Clippers, separate themselves. And that's back to the community. When we got these players, we started looking at the inventory. I know the discussion was we cannot take away access to the people that have been supporting us for so long, just because we have these players. We've taken care of these people when we had Blake and Chris, and to think that, just because we have 2 big stars again, we're going to take care of these people just like we would normally. And so what we did is we continued to focus all of our attention on accounts that have been there based on their tenure. So we were able to incentivize people and give back to them and say, hey, you've been buying a group for 10 years. You're first in line to pick. And that's what we traditionally do. But as you can imagine, having everyone come and wanting to buy tickets, it just made that even more of an urgency, but also a benefit of being a renewal group.
Great. And I think one thing you touched upon, right, is the overnight success. I mean, it wasn't overnight success as in, you've had personnel at the Clippers long before your arrival who worked extremely hard to build the brand in the city of Los Angeles. But looking at getting Kawhi and Paul George, from a sales manager perspective, from a management perspective, how do you keep your reps, your team, more or less motivated? I know obviously they're motivated by Kawhi and Paul coming in, but maybe their numbers are inflated. Maybe essentially the ticket sales, like it's through the roof. How do you kind of keep them level? How do you continue to ensure that they grow day to day?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think one, you hope that they're extremely motivated and excited to cash in on this opportunity, and a lot of them did. And I think looking back now, I wish I could hit pause and record just all of that. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the excitement and energy, and it was a fun place to be. It's obviously a fun place to be a lot of times, but that was a special day. But in regards to the reps themselves, I think the biggest thing is them not taking it for granted and start using or start making it seem so easy that they change their philosophy and go away from our offense. For us, we've spent a ton of time coaching, and the longer that I've been in this industry leading, the more I understand that's what my job is. And so, we spend hours, weekly, and just coaching our reps. And this would be a time where, some departments or some teams may say, hey, let's cash in on this. Let's not worry about how the reps sound. Let's just keep ringing the register and we'll get back to getting them on track later. And we really didn't do that. We didn't accept that. We got our reps immediately or continuing to listen to their calls, make sure they're training, because what a young rep may think is like, hey, someone calls in, they say they want to buy $70,000 worth of tickets. I need to close that immediately. That's money in my pocket. That's a sale for the team. It's good. Well, the more you do it, the more you realize that you may still undersell them. they could be spending 100, 150, 250K. And when the reps just are quick, to make decisions and just bring the register, there's a lot of money left on the table, not only for them, but for the team. And so that's a big piece of it. And that's important. And I think in regards to the time now, we're just trying to give them as many resources as possible, still coaching them, still holding them accountable to their craft and making sure they understand that, whether they want to or not, they're going to get better because that's my job. And that's what I'm responsible for the Clippers.
Yeah. And for any, listeners who are interested in getting into the sales game, maybe with the NBA or another major organization here in the United States, describe to me real quick, you talked about how you've essentially from your days in Ohio with Columbus and coming out to Los Angeles, how you've worked through the system, right? And you've gotten promoted rather quickly, I would say, to the point where you're at right now. Can you describe kind of who works under you in a way, like, right? Like how does it look? What's the outlook? If you're fresh out of college or fresh out of maybe a post-grad position, but you want to make the jump into sales and do sales in a sports organization, what does it take?
Yeah, no, it's good. There's a lot that runs through my mind. I think right now it's a big sacrifice, knowing that there's no professional sporting events with fans scheduled as of today on July 9th, that could change quickly. But at the same time, as you're looking for employment, not a lot of teams probably that are hiring at the time. Now, I would assume all good inside sales programs are building a bench and are ready to at any minute make a decision if it makes sense based on the organization. And so I think if you're out there looking for jobs or looking into the industry, one, don't get discouraged. But know that it might be a sacrifice. You may not have an opportunity to make the commission you're looking for. You may not get the role you're looking for immediately. It may take some time, and that's just the situation we are in today. I do think, there's a lot in the sports industry in regards to different roles that are more popular than others. Sales is predominantly the most popular. But, there are so many other facets of the business that are becoming popular in sports. And one, just in general, is data and analytics. From when I started 8 years ago, to now, the departments that control the leads and lead management and the data that we receive from third parties and just articulating what leads are good leads and who we should be reaching out to and how they're seasoned. I mean, that's unbelievable. When I started, that wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even a department. And I feel like Columbus was ahead of its curve. And, they had that. I shouldn't say they didn't have it, but it just wasn't, there was no investment, I would say, to the level that there is now. And now you're seeing departments of 5 or 6, where when I started, it didn't exist. And, the Clippers, within the last 2-3 years, created their first department. So, it's still growing. And I would challenge people that, if you want to work in sports, there's it's no different than any other business. It's got each department, and I would challenge people to look for the role that makes the most sense for them, not just take a sales job. If you want to be successful in sales, you need to be honest with yourself. You need to be committed to continuing to develop as a professional and not thinking that you know everything or that you're better than others. It really is a very humbling craft, and that you're going to have a really good day and feel like you're really good. You're going to have days where nothing works. And how do you mentally, how does that help, or how are you able to mentally overcome that? I mean, some people don't, and others, they thrive on it. And so for me in my career, I've been fortunate that I always was given a pretty clear direction that I was compared to the people that were on my team, and that my success would be based on how I stacked up to them. And so I really, really was intentional on knowing what I needed to do and what I needed to do to be successful. And so if I needed to put in more work, I would do that. If I needed to listen to other people that were making more sales, I'd do that. If I needed to go to a networking event and try to change up my game and get more leads, if I needed to ask more people for referrals that are my current accounts, you just do what you need to do. And I think in this sales environment we're in now, that's the mentality you have to have. If If you're sitting in COVID right now and you don't have a job and you're like, well, I'm going to wait and I'm not going to do anything until I learn more about sports sales and what the season looks like, well, then you're probably not cut out for this. You should be looking into reaching out to different people you could work for, connecting with them, seeing how their job's changing, seeing how you can better prepare, knowing that they're the hiring manager and they can tell you what they're looking for, what things do change. And I don't mean to put anyone in a spot, but it's just, that's what's going to be successful. And certainly if you have or feel those attributes or proactively doing those things yourself, get into this. This is your craft. This is your thing. Not to mention if you love sports, which, we could talk about this for hours, but I think that's the main thing too, is if you're listening to this podcast and you want to work in sports, this is not a fan club. This is not what it is. You need to be passionate about the craft, whether it's sales, whether it's community relations, PR, marketing, whatever role you're in.
Right. And that's why it's so great to have you here with us today, Justin, because I think that's what this podcast is all about, is bring on people like yourself, high-level business professionals in the sports world who can kind of shed insight on exactly what they do day to day, their craft, and almost maybe empowering others who aren't in the industry to take that next step or listen to a podcast like the S.B.R. podcast and say, hey, I can do it. Justin was able to, work his way up and, maybe even contact a guy like Justin or reach out to someone on LinkedIn. That's exactly what you need to do. So that's great words of advice. I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. I think one thing you touched upon was more or less going into the sports industry, right? There's so many options. And one thing I want to discuss is kind of pre-COVID, and I'm sure it'll be there post-COVID, hopefully, is the globalization of the NBA. It doesn't seem like it's slowing up. You're out on the West Coast, and I just kind of have a couple questions, right? We've discussed in the past about who your end user is, who your target market is, and you reach out through group sales in the community. But I know you discussed prior with me that you actually have a lot of international fan interest coming from places like China, over in Europe, different areas of the world. Can you kind of touch upon that? And do you guys reach out to those fans, or how do you essentially translate those leads into group sales?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I really enjoy talking about. It's actually, so, when I came into the Clippers, I wanted to just kill it, as I always do. And I'm looking at opportunities and ways to increase revenue. And one thing that I quickly learned from doing my research was, now I say that and I don't know off the top of my head, I think it's 3. I just don't want to be completely off. I think it's 3.5. I think 3 million visitors into international visitors, where it's like 5 million, or maybe, so it's around 5 million visitors into LA. Okay. And a lot of them are from China, a lot of them are from Australia, and Mexico, South America. And so for us, I didn't zero in on the United States. I zeroed in on the LA market. And what I noticed was a lot of international travelers, they go to 3 cities when they make their trip. And that typically is, at least on the West Coast trip, it's San Francisco, Vegas, and LA. Okay. And so for me, I just want to be part of that stop. I just want them when they're in LA to look for an opportunity to come out to an NBA game and just get the American experience. And so what I did was, once I realized this opportunity existed and that the Clippers had no current strategy on how to take advantage of that, 5 million people, I really started to dive in, and I got with the LA Sports Commission. I got the LA Tourism, got with Discover LA, became members. Clippers were already members, but worked with one of my reps at the time. She was very passionate about it as well, to learn more about how we could start to work with the city, who's obviously reaching out to international markets and trying to get travelers, to get them to recommend the Clippers as part of their stay. What I quickly realized that may not be as realistic. Obviously, LA is a pretty big city, and there's a lot of people that would be asking for that help, and a lot that probably need our help more than the LA Clippers. And so what I quickly realized, it was more of a partnership for me to get information from LA Sports Tourism and Convention Center, and just learn who's coming in, when they're coming in, trends, and all these things. And so what I quickly learned is there's basically tour operators, some international, some actually local. And what they do is that they work with the international operator to basically book a trip and book everything in that trip for the international traveler. You know, when you and I, and it's probably not fair to say you and I, it's probably just fair to say me as an individual, but when I do traveling, I don't go through a broker. What it seems to be is at least in China and Australia, that's more typical. So what you do is you go to a storefront or you call someone, and you go through all the options and they give you the option.
A travel advisor, essentially, someone like a trip advisor.
Yep. Yeah, basically. Yep. And so again, what we then realized was like, hey, you know, these third-party tour operators are willing to sell the Clippers as an option for them during their stay, but they want to be incentivized. And so then we realized is how do we create these relationships? And so what we did was we went to an international tourism event in Anaheim, and it was a really cool experience. It was something that I thought was really made a lot of sense, and it was a trend that the industry started. But what I realized too is even though it was very helpful, a lot of these people were coming at us because they just wanted our tickets anyways, and people were asking for them, and they want to be the go-to person, right? And so,
a lot of competition.
What I would say is you know, not that I wouldn't still go to that event, but because of our team and having Kawhi and Paul and just the change in that excitement, we had people reaching out to us. The first year, it was less of that. It was more of us creating relationships and then having that be a part of the recommendation. But last year, you know, we saw significant growth in the tourism, you know, and generally these people are already coming to LA. We just need to get them to come into the building. And so I don't know the exact number, but we were able to grow it, you know, at least 30, 40% by tracking it and just making sure we're being diligent. And then COVID hit, you know, and that was a huge eye opener for me because I see this as a really huge opportunity for a lot of people, you know, and a lot of sports teams is what I mean. And so I noticed it in January, December, though. What people in the sports industry, you know, they were like, really didn't even know about COVID, or I'm sure they knew about it, but really weren't concerned about it.
Sure.
I can tell you I was, because in January and February, I was having people from China and Australia and other countries that they just straight up canceled on us. And, you know, we obviously worked with them. We weren't going to force them, you know, to not get their money back. At the time, though, it wasn't a policy of ours to give money back. So, you know, for us, we're always thinking long term. You know, we made sure that we took care of people. But at the end of the day, that was just foreshadowing to what was coming. You know what I mean? And we obviously, once it got to February, March, we really started getting it. And, you know, at that time, it was the NBA canceling or postponing. So hopefully that changes. I think it'll take a little bit of time to get ratcheted back up. But I do think it's a really big opportunity because, you know, the international traveler, they don't care as much about the performance of the team they see. I know I said that, but a lot of it for a lot of these travelers is just wanting to be a part of the American culture experience. And they know sports is big a part of our culture. And so they look at going into the Staples Center and seeing a hockey game, a basketball game, or going over to the Coliseum. Well, not anymore, but going to the Coliseum and seeing a football game. So if the team's bad, you still can take advantage of that opportunity.
You know, it's kind of similar to someone here on the East Coast or anywhere in the United States going over to Europe to see an English Premier League match, right? Yeah. You know, going to Liverpool or Manchester and catching a match there and maybe not necessarily caring what the result is, but being there for the game day experience, which is just so unique. And it's a culture tie to that country that you're visiting. So, no, really cool there. And, you know, you said pre-COVID, obviously we're still dealing with COVID-19 here in early July, and the NBA season is in a bubble. Give your best guess on how the Clippers are going to play out the rest of the season, given that we do have a season. Are you confident? Obviously, they're sitting second place right now in the Western Conference. Solid record right behind your neighbors, the Los Angeles Lakers, or I guess those that share the same home as you right now before you guys move over into Englewood. But give your best guess. How do you think the Clippers are going to finish off the season?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I was very impressed by how the Clippers were resilient last year. We didn't have Kawhi and Paul last year for big basketball fans, and we were not expected to be a playoff team, and we exceeded expectations, and it just shows the grit of this team. I'm really starting to see that come through as I see these players getting ready, getting in the bubble. Pat Beverly today had shown a video of him in his hotel room in the bubble, and his attitude, you could tell, was very positive. There's a lot of people, I think, talking about the food or whatever, and he's just making it what it is and taking advantage of the opportunity. And I think that's just what our team is made up of, is a bunch of guys that are focused on winning and are focused on doing it their way, honestly. And so I would like to think that it's Clippers in 6 against the Bucks. Okay. But I think the more exciting matchup, I hate to say it, it's going to be Lakers Clippers, hopefully in the conference finals. Hopefully we all get that, and hopefully we can start that Kawhi and LeBron rivalry for the next couple of years.
I think every fan is hoping for that. Every sports fan, no matter where you are, is hoping for that matchup. And one more thing I want to touch upon is, post-coronavirus, the Clippers still have, a good outlook on things, right? You have stuff to look forward to. You are moving into your own stadium in 2024, as it is right now. So can you touch upon that, what that will mean to the Clippers organization and the Los Angeles community to kind of separate from the Staples Center? Not that it's not a great place to see a game there, but have your own stadium over in Englewood, what that'll mean to the organization.
Yeah, Staples Center is so iconic and so many good Clippers memories there. But obviously, really known for the Kings and Lakers championships. And, that's fine. I think that's LA history and sports history. And, we're happy to be a part of it. But I know Steve is just so committed to having his own home.
Sure.
And so when that comes together, whether that's soon or later, we just want to create our own brand, create our own image, and I guess grow that image and make it that we are a team in LA and it's our home, and less of feeling like we're a tenant inside of another team's building. And so I think everyone will be probably a little sad to leave Staples, but this is really exciting for the future of the Clippers, and it's what we needed to take the next step. And I've seen some drawings of it. I don't know what's out there yet, and I don't think we're totally finalized on everything. So I probably can't comment on much of it, but I can tell you it's a sharp looking building.
Good stuff. Well, Justin, best of luck to you. Best of luck to your organization, the Clippers here, as we move inch closer towards the rest of the NBA season into the playoffs. And I hope you stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it, and always happy to connect with you, and always happy to help any of your listeners that want to pick my brain on trying to get into the industry, looking to take the next step, if they're in inside sales, AE, or in management. And I think the last thing I had ended on that if I don't get a chance to talk to people and you have one takeaway, it's work for the right people. And just keep that in mind, that these situations are when you realize how important that is, but you'll notice it throughout your whole career. When you really work for the right people, a lot of things are easy to control. And so really encourage that when you do the hiring process, even though it may be competitive, that you're interviewing the people that you're working for and doing your research. And so that's all I got for you, and hopefully that helps.
Great words of advice. And that's why, we had you on today, Justin. So thank you so much for your time, and look forward to talking to with you again.
Thanks, Brian.
So there you have it, Justin Dunn, the Director of Group Sales for the Los Angeles Clippers. And one thing I want to highlight in hindsight of speaking with Justin is the NBA's take on COVID-19. I think of all the organizations out there, the National Basketball Association has always handled, whether it's a pandemic, political strifes, any, organization that's willing to go against them, or situations in the past, that have come up, with a great aptitude to improve what they do as an organization, and an even better aptitude to bring us a final product that is continuously growing and improving. And that being said, I want to highlight something that Adam Silver, who I consider to be one of the best commissioners out there when it comes to the major sports organizations, major sports leagues, I'd rather say, highlight something that he said in a Return to Sports special ESPN broadcasted about a month ago, because I think this really says it all. And I want to paraphrase this here. Adam Silver stated the incremental revenue difference between playing and not playing is not as great as people think. Instead, we have an obligation to try this. Adam Silver's rhetoric is strikingly different, right? Completely different than Major League Baseball's. It's strikingly different than a lot of business organizations outside of sports. What Adam Silver is saying is, yeah, we might not make money. This is a risk. But we're the National Basketball Association, and we have an obligation to bring sports back, to perform and let our fans know that we care. And just like the NBA, and just like Adam Silver's rhetoric is so important, individuals like Justin Dunn, tirelessly working in the background, are extremely vital for the progression of the National Basketball Association and any business alike. And for that, I have a lot of respect for Justin, his team, the Clippers organization, and the NBA as a whole, as we look forward to the return of National Basketball Association, to the return of basketball later this month. So I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the S.B.R. podcast. It's been a blast. Like always, I'll, on a weekly basis, essentially be bringing you sports business personnel. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.